first of all, I would never have agents buy into the company. Ever, ever, ever. I'd rather close. I went through the Great Recession, talked agents through bankruptcy, losing their home, etc. A lot of people must like him, and he must have some cult following, because most people would be like, get me out of here.
So no, I know now that you're like a big part of the Chicago scene, politically, artistically, business-wise, etc. But you're a Minneapolis kid.
Yeah.
And you kind of, you grew up only child, psychologist parents. And I think you've mentioned before that your mom was a single mom. So just talk me through a little bit about your childhood.
Yeah. So my parents both were psychologists. Were divorced when I was 3. And so my mom moved to Minnesota to go to the University of Minnesota. If you want this level of detail, both my parents were big academics. And that was probably just all the general stereotypes that go around academia, the environment, the politics, the people. That was really who raised me.
That kind of stuff seeped into your own, I guess, your own sensibilities.
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't me in DNA, at least a lot of it, it became me through osmosis. So a lot of the values associated with that group of people. Although I was no way ever going to get into academics. I was, I don't know if they'd say a troubled kid, but I was kicked out of a few schools.
What were you fighting? What was your?
I think that I was, they really wanted to put me on Ritalin when I was little, but my mom, not being a psychiatrist, but being a psychologist, was, over my dead body. I think today they'd put me in a coma. You know what I mean? I had a lot of energy, and I just, was kind of a class clown. I got that award my senior year, but to a high level. Did a lot of things wrong, did a lot of things illegal, usually in the name of getting other people to laugh and have a good time.
Do you live more with, is her name Joyce, your mom?
Yeah, Joyce, my mom. Yeah, and she and I are still very, very close. She raised me. And so, being a kid that really wasn't easy to raise, I didn't really value all the things she was doing until later on in life. In our house, you either did it right or you just didn't do it. And right was perfect.
Did you have to deal with any shit related to racism or prejudice?
Not a ton. A couple people called the house and you'd answer and they'd say wrong number, maybe twice. But in reality, I didn't notice any of that stuff till I moved to Chicago. In Minneapolis, even though it's much less diverse, it's a very liberal city, a very educated city, and I didn't experience any racism against me, against any type of person. In Chicago, when I moved here, I worked my way through college on the trading floor. And that's a very barbaric place, right? It's almost like literally going back in time.
And this is not even the stock exchange. This is the Merc, right?
Which is the Merc and the Board of Trade. And there is no threshold of entry. There is no education requirement. And so it was like literally going back 50 years. I mean, what you saw and what you heard was literally, for me, prehistoric. I'd never heard things like that, ideas like that, words like that. I was called a chink a few times. I thought it was absurd. You know what I mean? Like they sounded so idiotic when they said it. It didn't affect me negatively. I mean, someone who says something so stupid, like you almost have to laugh at them versus feel bad for yourself. But,
what made you kind of fall out of love, or did you ever fall in love with the idea of being a trader?
I went down there. I didn't grow up with money. And so I'd never seen money like that in my life. And that was outrageously alluring. I definitely, as a young kid, when you don't have something, you want it. And I wanted to have money. And so when I saw that, it was incredibly alluring. But I worked down there my whole way through college. I went to school at night. I worked down there during the day. And by the end of it, I realized that the things that were important to me, which were relationships, didn't exist down there. There was no value of relationship at all whatsoever. And I also didn't want how I felt to be dictated by if I either made money that day or lost money that day. I didn't want something else to control how I felt.
You have a sense of self-assurance about you. I've heard this I've not only observed this myself, but I've seen it and heard it from other people as well who know you. When do you think you got that?
So I'd say like the most pivotal thing in my life, when I was 22 and I was in college, I got sober. So prior to that, call it junior year of high school to 22, I was partying like most kids, but I was definitely, had that idea that I was definitely an addict, especially with alcohol. And it was just something that since then, I woke up one morning and, back then I opened up the phone book and I looked up AA and I went on the train and I went to a meeting and never stopped going. And so I spent my 20s doing a lot of, self-exploration and development of who I am as a person, who I wanted to be, repairing past relationships.
So you're there, you quickly make a name for yourself. You're perennially in the top couple of people at that company. But Thad, correct me if I'm wrong, from the interviews and stuff that I heard, it sounds like there's a little bit of resentment / bitterness for the way you were maybe not as appreciated as you might have wanted to be there. The snippets that I kind of gather, it's like you were the top, you were doing very well, but there's some part of it that you don't feel like you got your due. Fair to say?
At the time, I'm so grateful that I wasn't treated in a way that you would want to treat someone, because I would have stuck around, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm a very loyal person. I didn't need much, but I don't really have any resentment that I'm holding on to for there. But when I explain it, their choice making is so crazy that people would think that I'm bitter about it, but I had like zero bitterness. At the time, I felt, slighted, and I felt like, but I not even that bad back then. I just felt disappointed, if anything.
How do you make sure that your top performers never feel that way?
I'm a big believer in availability. If you're not available, and most people are replaceable, you'll probably be replaced. So I think everybody in the organization knows if they reach out to me, I'm available and I'm there for them. Obviously, it's a business transaction through compensation and service and product and physical location and all those things. But after that, is it a brand that the agent they feel good about representing? I think that's a big part of it too.
Before the Quad C deal, it was just Mike and yourself. Did you ever think about, giving ownership to some of the top agents who had been with you? Was that never a part of it?
Never. And when we first opened, we had one other person that wanted to have some ownership, and we said no, but it was more just keeping it super simple. And I knew that I was very fortunate to have really great partner in life and in business. And I know the more people, if you read about the demise of so many companies with ego and finance, that the more people that have a say in something, the less likely it is for it to stick together and succeed.
You mentioned you found a great partner pretty early in your career, Mike Golden. What's his sort of the trait about him that you most admire, that you wish if you could kind of rip it out of him and put it in yourself, what would it be?
If we were so similar and we were so bullheaded and strong and opinionated as I really am, that would have been terrible, right? We would have crashed all the time. But because he isn't that same way, and he's much softer, he is much more willing to appreciate another view or a way of looking at things, that made it far easier for us. So if I might come at something in a very reactive, powerful way, he'll kind of have the ability to absorb that, right? And then respond to that in such a way that I'll either continue on, it'll validate my opinion or where I'm going, or it gives me the ability to rethink where I am and maybe change my position.
There's a chemistry between you guys that's developed over time and can only really develop over time. But then in 2018, I want to say in April, TRD had the news that you guys sold a stake to Quad C. Now, I don't believe it's been disclosed. Quad C typically takes majority positions. So I'm just assuming, you can feel free to correct me if you want, that Quad C has a majority stake in the firm. I know you have a lot of leeway to run the company as you see fit, but can you just describe the motivation behind that, to take some chips off the table for you guys, as well as what it was?
Is that, it wasn't to... In some ways, it was to provide a capital backstop.
You're already a profitable business, which is rare in brokerage, I should point out.
We were profitable in 2008. We were profitable in 2007. We were profitable in 2009. We ran a very, strong company. To this day, we do. And so it really wasn't because we needed capital by any means. But for both of us, I think the asset had gotten to be valued at a level where it would have been irresponsible for our families not to divest some portion of it and diversify, right? Like we had gone through pre-Great Recession, post-Great Recession. We'd seen the value climb, we'd seen the value collapse, and we saw the value climb again. If I saw it collapse again and I had not sold some portion of it, I would look at my family and I would have thought, what kind of idiot am I to not be responsible enough to make a good financial decision? And so that's really all that it was. And when it came to the effect of the company, we had put non-recourse debt on the company a couple of times for that same reason. And we never really notified the company. It never affected the company. And as Quad C's partnership with us has not affected the company at all. The only way it's affected the company is that in a couple of ways, we definitely wouldn't, I don't know, we definitely wouldn't have bought Christie's.
And some other
without
M&A activity that you've done, right? In the last.
those we might have, because they were very strategic and they were in line with what we wanted to do when we brought on Quad C. And so those were just, we probably would have done both of those, a few of them. But Christie's was a big one. And that one, I don't think we would have ever brought on without an investor. That was just, it would have been too much risk. It would have been taking on too much.
Right. Was there any of it, was it at all reactive to what was going on in the brokerage landscape at that time? So 2018 is peak VC. Let's throw money at this. This is not a brokerage business. This is really a SaaS business. These were the kind of things that were going on. And you've spoken, we'll chat more about that in a bit, but was any of this decision reactive to what your competitors were doing with VC?
No, because we were very aware of what our competitors were doing. And so it wasn't in reaction to any of that. I think that people were really relieved that Compass didn't buy Christie's, right? I think a lot of people felt that would have been the nail in the coffin, give them an international network and a luxury brand that's recognizable around the world. That would have been the smartest thing they could have done in all reality, because that would have, spelled the end to a lot of different companies, and it would have given them another source of a revenue that they could build on that would be in reality, not in tech world, but a higher multiplier with reoccurring revenue and stuff like that. So that would have been really smart. But no, I don't think any of it was reactive. I think what was going on back then, you didn't want to take advantage of it and you didn't want to react to it. You just wanted to let it play out.
But you had to, Thad, I mean, I remember the billboard. It's now a iconic piece of your company lore, the don't ask directions from a stranger, etc. You were reacting, you were seeing your agents kind of question their future in this business with you guys, and just in general, you were pretty, is there an element now of schadenfreude for you, seeing how Compass has struggled, seeing that a lot of the predictions that you made at the time have borne out?
It's relief, right? I think I'm relieved because it lasted so long and they had such reinforcement from the media that it's kind of like, they started speaking their own language and people were adopting that language. And then a person would get frustrated and second guess themselves and say, what am I not seeing here?
I had to send multiple notes to the team saying, we are not going to call Compass a tech company. They're a residential brokerage until proven otherwise. Like we were one of the few outlets who was very careful with that. But yeah, to your point, I see.
And so I think that, nobody ever sees pleasure in someone's failure. But I do feel, and even though they've done so much damage to the industry, accelerated so much damage, I do feel they've brought so much more negative than positive. I can talk about the positive, but so I don't want to say I'm happy it's over, but I'm very grateful that there's at least a voice to its opposition. I remember very closely being at an Inman conference and hearing Ryan Gorman talk about, and he was so articulate and he was so knowledgeable. He might have been the smartest residential mind in the room. And he made so much sense and clarity. And I really respected his interview. And afterwards, he just got trashed for being a disgruntled competitor and having a chip on his shoulder and having been beat and talking about the agents he lost, where I was like, this guy just academically laid out a no-nonsense, clear reason of how you should be thinking. And nobody was focused on his message or what he said. They were only kind of surmising that he must have a chip again on his shoulder because some agents left.
Do you think that the industry, you alluded to damage. What do you mean by damage here? What kind of lasting, beyond, losing agents or agents for a while demanding equity maybe from you guys or anything like that? What lasting damage are you talking about?
I think there were some great privately owned companies. I'm a big believer I believe that they privately, independently owned companies, whether they're a franchise or not, with boots on the ground in the community, operate the best companies. 9 times out of 10, they are really hands-on.
Even though you're no longer independent, right? Even though you're
it's funny. I don't know, but I just feel like there were some companies that I really admired and I really looked at as being leaders in the industry that didn't want to sell. right? But they had to make good business decisions at some point and ended up selling. And so, like, in some of the coolest markets, you have look at Manhattan, you got like one independent left of any size, Brown Harris Stevens, and its owners are really, it's more like a secondary holding. You know, you have Best that operates the company and Hal. But you go to California and San Francisco, you got effectively one independent in the city. And in Palo Alto, you have Sereno, which we acquired. And so in Los Angeles, you know, now you're having a lot of breakup there from Hilton and Highland. But really, Pac Union, Alain Pinel, John Arrow, some of the great ones got sucked up. And so you really eliminated a lot of awesome culture. And those agents had no choice in going to where they went.
Do you think the role of the agent, that is existentially challenged? Because we've seen everything from iBuyers to companies like Compass to trying to automate all this stuff to discount brokerages, et cetera. Do you think, you know, what happened with travel agents and Expedia, do you think there is some element of that going to happen to your industry?
Absolutely not. And here's why. It's 2022, okay? Pre-Great Recession in our market, about 13.5% was being sold through discount, you know, brokerages, call it the Redfins of the world, but this is really pre-Redfin. The Great Recession eliminated effectively all of them, okay? And you grew up with seeing those signs either in handwriting or "We'll buy ugly homes." That's iBuying. Here's the thing with the big iBuyers, and I think
there's only one left.
Well, an Open Door, the CEO, last name Wu.
Correct. Eric Wu just left. He stepped down as well.
I thought he was one of the smartest guys in the business, by the way. I don't think what he did, I mean, other people gave him money so he can do whatever he wants with it. But that's all that is. And if you even have a big iBuying side of it, a local iBuyer is going to kill you because they're going to have the trades that they're working with. They're going to be able to operate on a smaller margin. So that scalability iBuying piece, I don't buy it. I think that agents could bring iBuyer offers in with sellers, but that hope of getting more is always going to be a lot bigger than the discount is going to be a lot tighter than the hope. So I don't think that there's that big piece of disruption. And on the discount brokerages, Redfin was founded before Zillow, and I'm dumbfounded why the board hasn't chosen a new path, brought in a new CEO. I wanted to take Redfin private before they went public and was trying to.
Oh, you did? Okay. Didn't know that.
Quietly raise money in order to do that. I thought that they have the best user experience in the entire market. And the fact that for well over a decade, it's been wasted on trying to play the brokerage game is ridiculous because they could have had a greater valuation than Zillow. And they just keep, you know, choosing a bad path. They still have the best user experience. It still blows my mind that they still smash their head against the wall every day on the way into the office. Like it makes no sense with what a phenomenal experience they're able to provide the user that they're still trying to make money in brokerage.
Their stock is down 85%, though. Is there another opportunity for you to try that again?
I don't have any time anymore, but boy, would that be the best. I wish I did. I wish somebody would, because that's probably the biggest opportunity I see in the market, is that they should be a lead generator. They should provide mortgage. They should provide insurance. They should provide home warranty, everything, and be everything around the house. And just give the lead. And they have brokerages licenses in so many of the states, and they can funnel those leads to qualified agents. They can pick the agents they want to work with. It's such an easy roadmap to success for Redfin. I don't know who is on their board, but if you were a board member and you and I were sitting there, and this is year 10, right? I think they got like 4% of the market share in Seattle where it was founded. Like you'd think, like after a while, that maybe you should change course. They've built something amazing. Everybody universally believes their experience is great.
This brings up then something I think about quite a bit, which is the cult of the charismatic CEO, right? Glenn Kelman, whatever you might say about him, he's a really personable, really compelling guy. And I think there's a lot of goodwill built around him as a person. People have said this about Robert Refkin as well. There's something about him inspiring, blah, blah, blah. Do you think that sometimes that kind of quality, which, by the way, you have too, you have that charisma and that sort of sense of mission, can blind people from the fact that they might not be running great businesses?
Ego is what you're talking about. And yes, ego is blinding because numbers aren't blinding, right? In each of those examples, whether it's Compass or whether it's Redfin, they don't make sense financially. And so when I talk about Ryan Gorman, and he was just let go or quit, whatever the one.
He was let go.
Okay. So, Ryan Gorman knew a hell of a lot more than Glenn or Robert. Glenn is a super nice guy. That's true. But I've heard him say a lot of things that I don't agree with in interviews in Inman. I've heard him just shake his head and smile and not say anything. And that says to me so much more than saying something wrong. Just like not acknowledging, not knowing, just kind of going along on the same track and not pivoting and changing. Or Robert, like it was a big miss. Like when they gave him the microphone about the stock, the number one thing he should have said is, "I'm sorry." First of all, I would never have agents buy into the company. Ever, ever, ever. I'd rather close than have that responsibility. I went through the Great Recession, talked agents through bankruptcy, losing their home, etc. A lot of people must like him, and he must have some cult following, because most people would be like, "Get me out of here." I don't think losing money should be an option in a residential brokerage world unless you have come up with something that is truly scalable to the end consumer, not to the agent.
Let's talk a little bit about Christies and kind of your moonshot for that product.
So theoretically, we should be able to, over time, pick and choose our partners to have a significant position in all the major markets in North America and around the world. So that piece of it, we feel that we'll be able to accomplish. I don't think we could have accomplished that with the brand of At Properties. That's one thing I learned, is that, just like Hilton and Highland might be a great brand in Los Angeles, but you bring it to Connecticut and nobody knows what it is.
Right, yeah.
And the other piece is, if you don't have a brand that's associated immediately with luxury, it makes it really, really difficult, because in real estate, you'd rather trickle down than trickle up. On our technology platform, it's beginning its first phase of consumer adoption. So consumers use it for something we call milestones. These are very remedial beginning stages where it just tracks the timing of the transaction. But my goal at the end of the day is to give a far better consumer experience when it comes to the real estate transaction, to be affiliated by Christie's International Real Estate Agents. So having access to that buyer, knowing what they're going to buy, when they're going to buy it, how much they're paying for it, is probably some of the most valuable data in the world.
Do you still do deals? I'm curious if you ever broker anything yourself at this point.
No, I stopped selling in 2003. So, my wife is our number one producer.
Yeah, I'm aware.
So my wife had the flu, I don't know how many years ago, and I had to pick up a client for her at the train. And I came home and I dropped the contract on the bed. She was sick. And she said, "I knew you wouldn't come home without a contract." And so I closed one of her buyers in a loft in one day, which was always my thing. If I sold them what I felt was the best real estate at the best price. And so if they agreed with me and bought it, we'd get the deal done in one day. And so it was fun. But I loved that aspect of the business. I miss it. I don't miss a lot of things about it.
Yeah, how do you give up that rush of deal making? Because that's like an instant kind of hit. Right?
by solving the problems of agents on a daily basis that are going through that exact thing. So it's almost like parenting, right? You get to solve your kids' problems with them and work through them because you've fallen on your face plenty. So it makes it much easier to work with the agents around you to help them become better. Like, you want your kids to be better than you, right? You want them to have a softer landing. You want them to be better people at the end of the day. And same thing with agents, right? I can talk with an agent, and I think they respect that. They like that they're not doing anything that I myself wouldn't do or have done. So that rapport, I think, is really important. I don't know how you lead a brokerage if you've never sold real estate.
You had your first kid, Ella, in 2003-ish, January 2003. Yeah. How did fatherhood change you? If you remember, was there like a before after for you at all?
There's one thing I've learned in being a parent. That's it. When people ask me, and I remember because I was at the park and I was just feeling this overwhelming love, right? I was pushing one of my kids in the swing and I was just looking around and I was just filled with this emotion. It was palpable. It was unbelievable. And what I realized, I said, wow, that's how my parents love me. And I realized in that moment why they did everything they did for me. I never appreciated it probably to the level of that moment. And that changed everything for me. That was like, wow, that's everyone. That's everyone for the most part, if you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
And so that appreciation for being a parent, being a child and being a parent, became profound in that moment, because it really made everything else meaningless at the end of the day.
How do you connect with your kids and keep that relationship going?
I think that a lot of the things that I learned early on in sobriety, right? So, like, a lot of times in life, we think that we're so terminally unique, where if you're willing to share with somebody, the person you're sharing with might say, you know what, I did that too. I want to recreate that same thing with my kids so that when something's really troubling them or they're really hurting, that they feel totally open and secure sharing that with me, right? And so I don't want to say like but that's a goal of mine. Like that's what I want. So on small, just being vulnerable with them, making sure that they don't feel shame, making sure that they, feel loved and that it's a safe space, doing all of those things so that, home or parent is a really beautiful word and not something to be avoided and never a person to be embarrassed around. Now, I don't know if that, that's probably accomplished over a long period of time. So it's very much the long game, which is probably like real estate, right? You got a lot of things that pop up that are the short term things, the pie in the sky, the, gold, the thesis du jour. But in parenting and relationships, they're all long game because you want them to be valuable forever. You don't want them ever to end.
Are you still in love? In love with your wife?
Yes. It's changed for sure. I think in love changes, by the way. I think they have infatuation and intimacy and those things in closeness. But in love means that no doubt you'd step in front of a bus for them, right? Like that's just what you do. It's like your children, same thing. Like I value my wife in a way that's more powerful than being in love. In all reality, in love in the moment is, it's very emotional. But I think that it's as important to have, almost the logical be as big as the emotional. And so that piece of it to me is over time in watching her and being with her and seeing how she approaches things, the assets, the liabilities, the fact that the humanity within her, clearly, I would not want to be with anybody else, period.
What does money mean to you? If you had to summarize it.
Access, freedom, flexibility. For me, being a kid that I just had dinner with a kid I grew up with, Abe Grossman. Abe Grossman was the first rich kid I ever met, right? I went into Abe's house and Abe had a huge house. Clothes were a big deal to me when I grew up. Like I did everything possible to dress as nicely as possible, probably to look as rich as possible. Maybe I had some imposter syndrome, where I probably dressed far wealthier than I really was for years and years and years and years. I still love clothes and how I present myself. So that hasn't left me with being able to buy whatever kind of clothes I've wanted.
What's your biggest extravagance over something that you bought that you're like, man, I was just completely spoiling myself or my family or my kids on this kind of thing?
Art. When I grew up, my mom liked Gauguin. So she would get the poster, cut off the piece that said it and get it framed. And I grew up with Gauguin in my house, right? It was a poster. Maybe it cost $5, $10 or whatever it was back then. And so in 1997, I just started making money in real estate. After I think I got my first commission check, or maybe one of those, my first year, I bought a piece of original art. I lived in a $600 apartment, but the art on the wall was far more important to me than the house I lived in. So I had this tiny, tiny apartment, but I had this original piece of art in my kitchen.
You're also active on the other side of it, which I didn't know as much about until recently, which was very active, very involved in democratic politics. What's your level of involvement and commitment to just democratic politics in general?
I mean, people call it politics, call it whatever you want, but you got to figure who you are and what you stand for. And so if you look at humanity, you brought that word up at the beginning, equal rights for everyone, period. Sexuality, race, religion, sex, whatever it is, that piece of it is crucially important to me. Separation of church and state, right? Like what God, who's God? I think that keeping that separate is crucially important. Public education, access, right? To think that only the wealthy are going to produce the smartest kids, that's a joke. There's a lot of talent that's out there being wasted because we don't provide access to public education. You're a believer in trickle up economics, not trickle down. So that points me in one group, unfortunately. right? I wish these were values that were shared by more.
And this puts you quite at odds with most of the other people in your industry, definitely the people in the industry at your level.
Yeah, but I think that who is the industry dominated by, but, a lot of older white guys.
Mm.
You get a lot of the same people in the room. They all think the same way.
You're sort of intimately connected to one of the key driving forces of the economy in Chicago, and you're involved in a bunch of other. Would you ever consider throwing your own?
I used to think, because my dad would say to me, it doesn't matter how much money you have. The government's pen dwarfs you. If you want to have a huge change to a constituency, to a population, to children, to education, to human rights, you're in the government because that's the only way you can do it. Bill Gates Foundation is a rounding error to the United States of America. Mm-hmm. So, and I was filled with patriotism. Like the Star Spangled Banner used to be my favorite song a long, long time ago. And I really loved it. And I really wanted to get into politics. But now it's sort of like, selfishly, you're trashed, your family's trashed. You have no time because there's no campaign finance reform. All your time is raising money. Every relationship is monetized. Who likes you for anything other than your power? At the end of the day, it's like, do you want to spend my last 30, 40 years? I mean, like, if I can have impact on the greater good, I would like to do that in whatever way possible. But I just don't think that, like, I think in business, I'll never have a bigger engine than this. Mm-hmm. Like some people say, never say never, but I don't want to go reinvent something. I want to do as much as I possibly can with this engine and make it pretty cool. Other than that, I think different things will unveil themselves that we'll be able to do to be helpful. There's nothing more beneficial than the help you give someone that nobody knows about, right?
But the counterpoint would be the last donation you made. I know about it because it was a named donation, right?
Are you talking about Children's Museum?
Yes.
It's so funny. I never thought about doing it anonymously. I never thought it was like that. I just did it, and it took a long time to manifest. Mm. So I never really worried about that. If anything, I hope it encourages other people in real estate to contribute at a decent level if they can. What's your biggest regret, professional or personal? I have one child that I could have done a better job with. I think that I could have been more inquisitive, and I could have created an environment where they were more comfortable. And I wish that I would have put more energy into that.